From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter and what is west of Westeros and the shadows of the east, this is Casterly Talk, a live recording edition. I'm Ken Knapsack. Hey friends, welcome to the mostly Star Wars studio, but this is where also I do Casterly Talk. A lot of you probably know that. You might be listening in podcast form, still releasing this particular episode as a podcast, but because we're podcast first, as I always like to say, which is just a reminder that that's why I'm wearing a beanie and don't trim my Davos-like beard today. But also going to have some fun, getting some attention on the YouTube channel today by going live here on the YouTube channel for Casterly Talk as we try to build that up and build that out as we race towards House of the Dragon. So we've got some people checking in today, already watching live. I'll be calling on those comments. If you got questions, kind of a general form today, I'll cover what we're going over in a second. Victor's here, says in a work meeting. So really excited to listen in today. I love when listeners and viewers have one eye on work and two eyes, because we're all three-eyed ravens here on Casterly Talk. Got Valerian the Conqueror. Cheers to you, says Lord Knapsack is here. I'm just a peasant. I'm from Flea Bottom. Ranger Donald is here as well. Eric Monroe. Thank you all for checking out the show live today. A lot of fun. And we'll be getting some people calling into the show. I say calling in, but really they'll be StreamYarding in, which if you are a Patreon supporter of mine at patreon.com/CatNapsuck, you can access that StreamYard link, and I'll bring some people in. Eric Monroe is a big Atlanta Braves fan, and he says in chat, off topic, but my Braves won the World Series. You know what? It's on topic because it's a victory, and we're always about winning and losing these big battles here at Casterly Talk. And that's a big victory there. LQ is here as well. So happy to have you all. We've been doing the big Game of Thrones rewatch, of course. Went back to season 1, episode 1, and it was a while ago now, but we're still going strong. We just wrapped up season 3. Next week, I'll start diving into season 4 as we go deeper into the show, not just look back, not just relive it, but and talk about the episode's legacies and what was the episode known for and what they may be remembered for even more now, but diving into the big themes and lessons that I think are in the show and taking that big deep dive into what the show is trying to tell us and what the show maybe, I'm not just saying setting up in that plot detail sense, but just telling you here's what's happening in the story, here's the way it's going to go forward, and how that all ties into some of the later seasons. Whether you love them or not, that stuff is there. But happy to have you here. We're going to be looking ahead to House of the Dragon. Couple of news updates here. I love checking into that, so we'll get to that in a second. Will McLean is here as well. Also an Atlanta fan, I believe, too, as well. So Eric and Will can cheer about them Braves baseball players winning the big World Series. That's, again, like a big medieval fight. I said that like someone who doesn't watch baseball and hasn't watched baseball religiously for 30 plus years. The Atlanta professional baseball sporting team. The Nye Mets are my favorite baseball squadron. So let's take a look here, and we'll open up the forum here in a second. So if you're preparing to access the show via that StreamYard link in my Discord, you can get ready to do that shortly here. I did want to look back as we wrap up season 3 and go into season 4 on the Game of Thrones rewatch. I was really curious for my own my own fandom where season 3 would eventually land for me. I don't love doing the ranking things. It's fun to rank the seasons, but season 3 does fall lower and lower on the charts for me over time. Only because I think there's some giant important things in that season, but I think it's mixed in with some of the more piece moving episodes, setup episodes. I don't believe in filler episodes as a concept, but this had the beginning of the season. You always are setting the pieces, then I kind of redid it again in the middle of the season, and where would that lie? And I'm happy to report that looking back on season 3, I connected with a lot more of what is in that season in terms of the big themes and the lessons and the motifs that are moving the show forward. And I really do see season 3 as this important shift in the show. It's truly a closing of the chapter. And the Red Wedding's a big, painful, gruesome, brutal changing of that book and turning the page and changing over to a new chapter of the show. Season 4 is about to begin here on the rewatch. And of course, you think immediately season 4, you think of Oberyn Martell, Pedro Pascal coming on the show, Ilaria Sand, so many wonderful new characters, while also some of our favorites are already transitioned out by the time season 4 starts. And by once season 4 gets going, we get to that purple wedding and we lose even another pillar of the show. So I've just been really looking at season 3 as this important season in terms of the overall feeling of the show, particularly around Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. And what do you guys feel about that? And what season 3 is saying about those characters? And how when season 3 ends, you really are tying so much hope onto Dany. We talked about that last week. The Miso moment, problematic as it may be with today's lens of our viewership, it's still an important and powerful moment for Dany, who begins the season looking for an army because she needs an army. She's learned she has to do these things herself, but she does need an army. She's got some ships maybe now, but she needs an army. And then after Astapor, she goes on to Yunkai, and that's where she decides to use her power and maybe set aside a little bit of her charging destiny that she feels the right to the throne, the right to her family's land, so to speak. She wants to use that power for good. She's not yet quite at the breaking the wheel point, but she wants to keep rescuing people, freeing people from all sorts of bondage, which she herself was in a few times in her life. And that's where the show kind of ends, and how that's important for her and how that's going to be challenged. How Dany's going to be kind of whittled away for better and definitely for worse. And I love how that season really kind of sets Dany up for a lot of that stuff, while also refocusing Jon's lesson. I keep mentioning Mance Rayder in episode 1 of season 3, really telling Jon, oh, I know what you want to be. You want to be a hero, which Jon to that point does. And he still wants to be at the end of it. That's why I think a lot of the feeling he needs to go home and leaving Ygritte, which is probably the right decision. But I think it now becomes a decision for Jon about the people. And he's picked up the wildlings have gone to free folk for him at this point already. He's learned so much from Ygritte. He's learned so much in season 2, so much in season 3, because I think in season 2 he had the rug pulled out of him, underneath him for what he believes, what he was raised to believe about why the wall was there, why we're fighting, and how he is transitioning towards that soul who will fight for everyone. And that's the power of season 3 as he moves forward too. So checking in on that kind of stuff. We got some comments coming in. Love these comments. Eric Monroe, who always chimes in, season 3 is middle of the road for me, but it's a lot to love. I do agree the finale was the weakest, though, of the finales. Yeah, and that's the other thing, too. If we're going to rank finales, which is part of the fun of being a fan, that finale does fall a little flat for me. Only, I think, because of the Red Wedding. I think just that it was just impossible. Not even, I don't want to say continue the momentum, but just we are all still recovering, and we wanted immediate revenge. And the closest we got revenge was Arya killing the Freymen there. Nathan's here. Nathan says, completely agree. The end of season 3 is the beginning of the transition into greatness. I rolled my R's because it's there. And Trey T is here as well. Eric goes on to say, this season 3 is the season that showed Jon what loving someone means. I love that take, Eric. He went back to the watch because his heart is always loyal to watch above all else. Yeah, and I think that starts to be challenged for him. He is loyal to the watch, but it's the watch that's going to kill him. And how do we get to that point? And this is one of those big transitions where, again, he is learning what it is to be a hero. I always say this: Jon Snow's season 6 moment in front of the charging Ramsay Bolton army is a beautiful shot. It is majestic. It is epic. It is Jon pulling out that sword that is in front of the charging army. It's brave. It's also Jon at his most foolish. It's Jon at his most impassioned in a bad sense. It's a mistake moment for Jon, and he's saved by others, and would have been saved sooner if he learned to his sister. So that's why I think Jon has so much more to learn about what it is to be a hero, but he's picking up these big lessons. And I love what you're saying, Eric, about Jon in season 3 really, truly learning to love. And that's something that's pretty powerful there. All right. Justin C says, question, why is season 4 the best? Laugh out loud. Every episode is so good. Season 4 is an interesting season for me too. There's so many things that I love in it, but I don't have that that ominous feeling I had going into season 3 of, do I like season 3 as much as I thought I did, or do I not like it as much as I thought I loved it? The big confusion. I don't have that season 4 because Oberyn Martell, because Pedro Pascal, Purple Wedding. There's so much going on. We really get more with Baelish. Baelish and Varys not really present in season 3, which might be one of the reasons I don't love season 3 as much. They've got great things. When they're there, they're great. Conleth Hill in the background is great. Baelish, Aidan Gillen, great. But I think love seeing them kind of, especially Peter Baelish, Aidan Gillen showing back up more in season 4 there. Nathan has a follow-up to his point there. At this point in the show, it's really sets these two up as important characters. And then Nathan asks, were you shipping these two as a couple? I never really was, but I think maybe in the back of my head, it made some sort of sense. And because again, with George R. R. Martin still having not finished his own story, that title of A Song of Ice and Fire always just rang true. What is that? What is that meaning? And here you got ice and here you got fire, Jon and Dany. So them being intertwined in any way, shape, or form made some sort of sense to me. Knowing or feeling or thinking, and R plus L equals J at some point. And I used to wear that T-shirt, still have that T-shirt. Having that in the back of my head, it always, maybe that kind of pushed me off. Not that I celebrate the love of Cersei and Jaime with a little bit of a distance. I'm happy for you too. I just can't condone it. So I think maybe I was always a little pushed off by that with Jon and Dany. But the fantasy of them just interacting was something I think we always wanted, show or book, right? Doesn't matter. Just how you love this story, this world. You want to see them interact. I was part of something that was called School of Thrones. It came out, I think, after season 1 or 2. We shot it with a bunch of great folks. I was Coach Balon Greyjoy, coach of the water polo team. And we had some scenes with Dany and Jon interacting, and it was kind of played as this like, we all want to see that one day. So look that up too if you've never seen School of Thrones, and see my little cameo there. And I did some uncredited writing help with that web series there. So yeah, Nathan, I'm wasn't quite there on shipping, but I definitely needed to see them interact, and we did, which is also why, man, going into season 7 and them finally meeting and Dany returning to Dragonstone, things that we've been waiting for so long. And I thought they played the Dany returning to Dragonstone is still one of my favorite kind of like sequences in the show. That's why I was bummed about set leaks and stuff like that that came. And it's, spoilers and leak photos and set photos are in the news again today in the movie world. No comment on that. I'm not in that part of the world anymore. But I'm careful with them with Game of Thrones. And in talking about House of Dragon, I'm going to talk about some stories today, a couple of stories, but I'm not going to choose to show the photos and not even discuss the photos in detail. I don't even consider what I'm about to discuss in House of Dragon similar to the Jon and Dany thing. They're just kind of characters, just kind of people, just kind of actors on the set. I don't consider those super spoilers because a lot of them are known actors. But if you want to go on completely blind, I understand. But the Jon and Dany ones from season 7, absolute big moment of the show. And I saw them first accidentally online. So that's why I'm still kind of resistant to that kind of stuff too. All right. More comments on season 3. Love this. Ranger Donald, it's good to have you here. Some of you in my Patreon page, my Discord know that Ranger Donald recently had some health problems, but also celebrated a big birthday, was taking some time off. So Ranger Donald Long, happy to have you here. We love having you around here. Season 3 and going into season 4 says, to me, closes how the show was and begins to take the shape of the show as we know. I am right there with you. He goes on to say, especially in 4, when you see they have they start filling in some story points going forward, and they're passing from the books, which is as I always contend here, if you're relatively new to these parts, whether you're watching or listening, I always contend the show 30 seconds in was going its own path. It had a stronger path to follow and looked and felt more like the books in the first couple seasons, without a doubt. Never going to deny that, but it knew it needed to do something different. It knew it had the chance of getting past the books, and it knew it needed to tell its own story thematically, which is why I love analyzing what these episodes, down to an individual level, are telling us about the character's journey in the show. And the books, to me, are almost at this point completely separate. That George, every week we're just gonna say, George, just pen to paper, Get it done. We're all waiting because we want to hear George's version. We want to read George's version. It's going to be spectacular. It's going to have a lot of descriptions of eel pies, and maybe, a lot of the characters just kind of, meander and write themselves into corners. But I cannot wait to see not just what syncs up, but just what is different and what has a different feel to it as well. So going back to Ranger Donald's point here, I absolutely love this point of what he's saying of what the show was and the show that Game of Thrones kind of came to be, including kind of the look, the big kind of look or feel as the budget grew. That was the biggest thing. By the end of season 3 and going into 4, the numbers of the show are spectacular. All through season 3, Game of Thrones was setting viewership marks for itself, viewership marks for HBO. And HBO by this point really knows. What we always talk about is kind of funny. After season 1, after season 2, there was always kind of that, will the show get renewed? Yeah, sure, most likely. Yeah, it's probably not at risk. But budget-wise, this has happened before. Shows that were incomplete, networks or companies have to let them go. Things aren't working. The money's not being made. That's what happens. It's a business. After season 3, I think it was never in doubt. I think during season 3, it was never in doubt. The numbers were so big. The Emmy nominations were coming in more and more. And then we go into what the show was, including the look. And Miguel Sapochnik is one that shows up, and his name we're going to discuss here in a second. And the show gets bigger. And that bigger isn't always better. I still think the Battle of Blackwater Bay might be my favorite battle. Watchers on the Wall is very tough to beat for me. The long night, hard home sequence. I mean, there's some wonderful things coming, but there's something still that just grabs me about the Battle of Blackwater Bay. It might be because I'm such a Stannis fan. Hey, Laserbolt checking in as well. Eric Monroe talking about season 4 says the Red Viper steals the show in season 4. And my boy Stannis has the finest hour. Yes. Eric Monroe and I are very proud Stannis Baratheon supporters. So, we're there for the lessons of Stannis. We're absolutely there for the lessons of Stannis, but we're also there to occasionally still root for him and cheer for him. And at the end of season 4, can't wait till we discuss it on the show. But man, that was the next day at work. I think I was still at Screen Junkies at the time. No, actually early on. No, that's right. No, I wasn't there yet. I was there for season 6, which was the downfall, post the downfall of Stannis. Season 4, it was like showing up to work. And just kind of telling all the people, see, I told you Stannis was good. I had a feeling it wouldn't last long, but it was there as well. Thank you all for checking in and watching here. We're still going strong here. Casterly Talk, the YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, give us a subscription. Ring that bell. Do all those YouTubey things. I've been on YouTube a long time, but you want to hit a bell or not, I don't care. Shame your way to knowing when the shows are on. Also, you can use the hashtag Casterly Talk on Twitter when talking to me at Cat Knapsack, and I'll find the question you have. That's especially for episodes that are on the way in the rewatch, because I sometimes tape the episodes ahead. If you have a specific question about an episode, just go ahead and tweet me. Use that hashtag Casterly Talk, and I'll find it. The great name of the show that was given to me by still a contributor around here once I can work out a schedule and start getting people back on regularly, the wonderful Lon Harris. That was the name we pitched. For those who've never heard that story, I've told a lot, but we had pitched that show to Screen Junkies when we were going to be doing the Game of Thrones show that became Watching Thrones, that I hosted with Trish Hirschberger, Michelle Boyd, and Spencer Gilbert. We pitched Casterly Talk, among many other names. Lon is so good at names. And so when I launched this, when I turned Daily Thrones into this podcast, I wrote Lon. I said, could I use that name over here? And he said, yeah. So, of course, Lon's going to be coming back on the show. You know what, Nathan? Equating to hitting that subscription bell to the shame bell is me, right? It's that self-loathing button I have inside me. Subscribe to my channel, hit the bell, and yell shame at yourself for doing so. It's not just a reference, it's a way of life. Ranger Donald says this: over 10 years ago, nobody did big budget fantasy shows on TV, at least, and that's so true. Love Battlestar Galactica. I love the Battlestar Galactica remake, and of course, reboot, I should say. And of course, I grew up watching Lauren Green and everyone in the original Battlestar Galactica. I thought it was a Star Wars TV show, quite frankly. I love Battlestar Galactica, but what could they have done with the budget that they had now? And the faith, talking about a show that was very critically well received, very well praised from fans, didn't have the budget, didn't have the viewers, and ended up having to go. that's an example, and they were smoke and mirrors and some of those shots and the hangers and everything like that. So Game of Thrones, you're right. One of the things that as we see now, Wheel of Time coming out, Lord of the Rings, Witcher, Last King, Viking, all these big shows they're doing the big fantasy sword and sandal stuff. Obviously, a lot of it is owed to Game of Thrones and other big time shows that made TV an event. But that budget, man, that season 1 budget of Game of Thrones is still fun to kind of see up on the screen there. Some more stuff coming in here talking about season 3. Valerian the Conqueror. Another thing to mention about season 3 compared to the earlier seasons, it only covers the first half of a book. Its full arc ends at season 4. That's so true. And this is, for me, I love always discussing my entry point to Game of Thrones was the show. I mean, I should say Song of Ice and Fire. When I say Song of Ice and Fire, I mean just kind of this whole world we're all constantly in here and celebrating. But I loved the show so much. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to pick up the books. And it was like, I finished season 1, read book 1, finished season 2, read book 2. And I really came to this crossroads, Valerian. I came to this crossroads, was like, I know, because we had heard that, season 3 and 4 are going to kind of split that book up. And I was like, do I read halfway through? And I decided not to. I said, I'll wait till after season 4 then. If that's the case, I'll wait till after season 4. And that's why the Red Wedding was unspoiled for me as a TV event, as a story event. I'd heard about it, there was something called the Red Wedding, but wasn't sure. I thought it was Joffrey's wedding. So I completely caught off guard, as I talked about a couple weeks ago here on the show. And then after that, though, I couldn't wait anymore. And I went into season 4 for me also denotes a period of time as a fan that I knew, quote unquote, knew everything that was about to happen, which, as we know, is relatively different. You even sometimes you thought, but the show did something differently. Here we go. Willow show. Yeah, your Willow show coming to Disney Plus. There you go. I love Willow the movie, but man, talk about budgets. There's a show that I'm curious to see what they can do with a bigger budget here. Nathan says, no shame being a GO2 fan, nor a Casterly Talk fan. There you go. I love that. Heath Hill, hey, what's up, Heath? I feel like Game of Thrones helped at adaptations because it showed people that one book doesn't have to be one movie. One book can be one season, one half, or 2 movies. Dune, aka what's appropriate. Yeah, that's a great thing to talk about too, Heath. Adaptations are always going to be a challenge from book to screen, always going to be a challenge. Comic book, graphic novel to screen, always going to be a challenge. The TV shows and the movies have to tell their own stories. And we saw, I think there is some correlation to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, which was going to be one movie and then 2 movies. And then he had a fight to get that 3rd movie and was able to tell the story. Then still needed to go back and do those wonderful expanded editions, which is the director cuts of Lord of the Rings are the only ones we watch in this house. And then from that, George R. R. Martin famously for years, number 1 said, I wrote Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire to not be adapted, as we all know. And then 2, so many offers came in, especially after Lord of the Rings, about this is a perfect property to do it. And I love that the way it worked out. And it's still a miracle how it happened. Benioff and Weiss getting that job. A lot of people thoughts and comments on that, but it was almost a miracle that happened, and that after the ill-fated first pilot, the fact that this show was able to exist and do what it did all the way to the end. Whether you love it or not, it pulls you to the end. And I think to Heath's point, it just showed that this is what you can do. And I have no problem with all these shows that are like, hey, this worked for them. Let's do for us with, especially Wheel of Time. I know so many Wheel of Time fans are so excited for the show. I'm not familiar with Wheel of Time other than I know a lot of the minor details of the plot, and I've had some friends in my life who are just such passionate Wheel of Time fans, including a lot of you might know Joe Starr from the old Screen Junkies days over there at Fandom. You go into his house, he has like 19 books on the top shelf. So a lot of people excited. Yeah. And Heath, I think that's a great point, showing that, hey, it's not just about throwing money at the wall. It's about what story can you tell, and will people, who aren't normally fantasy fans, pull in. Another thing, looking back on Game of Thrones as a show, like I know fans. In fact, Spencer Gilbert was one of them over watching Thrones. He wasn't there for the magic. He wasn't there for the dragons. He actually kind of didn't love that stuff. He loved the politics. He loved the inner workings. He loved the character stuff. And I think that he's not someone who's not against any kind of fantasy stuff. He works in that nerd world. But I know fans who always were kind of like, the magic stuff kind of throws me off. I like the fighting. I like the politics. And most often those people also like the sex. But hey, sex position started to drop off after season 2, right? Nathan Ecker's got a question here. Knowing how the show ends, do you or anyone here still recommend reading the books? Good question here. So Eric says, Nathan, both it's on our own thing though. Go that way, and I think you'll be pleased with the books. Yeah, Ranger Donald says, I didn't know it was a book till I started watching the show. I kind of in the same way. My friend used to always joke that they made a book out of this show, and there's some truth that to me. I knew it was a book. I knew it was coming. I saw a little featurette on HBO. I think I remember George R. R. Martin talking about Winterfell, and I'm so happy with how it looks. And I was like, oh, okay, that's this book series coming out. But I didn't know much more about the books, other than I had some employees of mine who were reading the books and were always talking about the books. And I didn't know what they were talking about. I probably had everything spoiled, as they always were talking in the break room. Richard Donald says, didn't know it was a book. Finished season 5 with John and went, well, now I got to read the books to find out what happens. And then insert surprise and disappointment. Nathan adds to his earlier comment, I know the books haven't caught up to where the show ended, but I feel like the ending of the show would influence my reading of them. That's a great question, Nathan. I think that's a great question. If you are a show fan, and I know a lot of people who are show only in the sense of, I don't really read the books. I was going to after the show ends. And regardless of any feelings about how the show ends, just knowing, and if you're like me, you love how the show ends, because I love how the show ends. That is going to have, there's a contrast to compare is going to happen. And getting into the mind of George R. Martin on why it's taken so long. And making jokes at George's expense is not, by now it's a moot point. He's going to finish him when he wants to finish him. And when he feels it's right, which is in truth what I want as a fan. But I wonder if even he has to contrast and compare. And I'm not saying I occasionally I can go down that conspiracy theory route where I think George R. R. Martin is in his office kind of going, well, what if I did this? Because they did this, I don't think he's going to do it out of spite. But I just wonder if naturally some of those things might come up. Because George has admitted I made the joke earlier about writes characters into corners. He just kind of spirals off some of the stories. He admits that he writes and writes and writes. He writes in a different kind of fashion, and he might take the story elsewhere. He knows clearly where he wants to go. He knows what the Song of Ice and Fire is about. And I still think the show picked up some of those bigger beats. Case in point, George mentioned, Hodor dies in the show. Somewhat similar, but mine's also completely different, but also the same. We'll find out when we get there. So Nathan, I think at this point you are safe to go in and start reading those books. And one of the reasons I think you're safe to go in is, number one, they're damn good. There's a reason we all love this world. If you show only, there's a reason you love the world that the show is playing around in and the characters that the show is playing with. That clearly comes from George, clearly comes from the book. So I recommend doing it. It will also, I think, expand your joy of the show. Never confuse that knowledge with what the show's actually doing. And I think that was, not to get philosophical, I think that's part of the problem with a lot of fandoms, and specifically the Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire fans. You can't help but contrast and compare. And I think there was a narrative that the show was following the books, and then the show didn't have the books, so therefore it had to go wonky. It's not the case. It couldn't be the case. The show was doing its own thing from the beginning, just had a little tighter path to follow. That we know, like I said earlier, can't deny that. But I think, Nathan, if you read the books now, even with the show in the rearview mirror, I think you get a better appreciation. I almost said understanding, but that's not 100% right. But you get a better appreciation of the world. There's those little details that are definitely in the show that someone like Brian Cogman would make sure, the keeper of the lore when it comes to Game of Thrones for that writing team. He'd put things in, one-off references, Easter eggs, even those kind of things. I just think occasionally that stuff is viewed as plot. And if you go down the path, I always give the example of Quaithe, because Quaithe is a great character to look at and go, wow, this is a mysterious character that shows up in season 2, has all these words of warning and wisdom for Jorah. And in the books, she's got more to do. And in the books, you start pulling out these wonderful theories. Casterly Talk is just part of a bigger Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, podcast, pundit, YouTube ecosystem. And I listen and watch so many other channels, and you should too. History of Westeros is a great one. Alt Shift X is another great one. But I also thought that you could pull out so many wonderful theories about Quaithe, the Sheriff Sea Star theories and everything. And then when they don't show up in the show, you just naturally think maybe you're going to feel disappointed or feel shortchanged when the show never told you it was going to do that. The show never made those claims. It just said, here's this character. Let's use this character. This character has a relationship to Danny more in the books than Jorah, but we can use this character to kind of feed stuff to Jorah, help his story, use him for those themes. And that's all it needed to do. And I think, though, you'll appreciate Quaithe even more if you read the books. It's just one minor example for me. Yep. Yeah, see, there you go. Valerian says, yes, read them. When season 8 ended, the series didn't finish for me. It was only the beginning. That's when I picked up the books. It's been one of the best journeys I've taken. Balerion the Conqueror, yeah, for a conqueror, you're also very nice and sweet, much like Danny. I think that's great. Yeah. Because it's this world. That's where I'm really at now in my Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fire, and soon House of the Dragon fandom. Is this idea of it is not just a show for me, and it's not just the books. It's this world. It's this world, these characters full of things that make me think about my own life, lessons, enjoyments, little moments, big moments. I love this just as much as I love something like Star Wars, which obviously I'm more known for these past few years. But Game of Thrones is this wonderful world to crawl into. So Nathan, I think on Balerion the Conqueror's advice, start that journey. The show ends. It's only part of the journey. Keep the journey going. Pull into the world. And I can't recommend enough. Once maybe you do that, dive into Fire and Blood too. I'm actually going to reread the Dance of the Dragons Fire and Blood section as we get ready for House of the Dragon. Storm of Swords, says Eric Monroe, is my all-time favorite book ever. I mean, look, that is amazing. I absolutely love that. Eric, what are the other choices? Is it like a Garfield comic strip book, maybe Far Side, and then Storm of Swords? That might be my list. Nathan comes back and says that's a great point. I pick up more each time we watch the show that I imagine or anyone would pick up even more by reading them. Yeah. It just expands it. Got a great comment coming here from Andrew, but also I want to shout out Victor Bracamontes with a very generous Streamlab donation sent for all the free content and passion. Man, Victor, I love that, man. That really makes a lot. It makes me feel good, man. Just a man in a beanie talking about something I love. And so happy to have House of Dragon down the pipeline. But if House of Dragon didn't exist and no prequel series and no animated series were coming, I'd still be here. Because that's what this show and these books and these worlds and these characters and these lessons and these themes mean to me. It's something I'm going to carry with me. That's why I love it so much. I get made fun of sometimes. I hear some of the sniggering behind my back by some of my coworkers, some of my friends. He's still talking about Game of Thrones. He's still talking about Game of Thrones. It's not just a TV show for me. It is definitely a property, an IP, a franchise, a world that I love exploring and love going into little corners. And I love the wild theories. And I love hearing some of the disappointments. There's some great points of people who don't love season 8 that I love listening to. I love season 8. Season 8 is really one of my favorite seasons. But I love hearing the discussions. I love hearing why it didn't work beyond just some of the blanket statements. That's why the show didn't have the books one. And no one here today was suggesting it, but when it gets mentioned, it's just one of those things I swat away because it's a false narrative of why things didn't work. Maybe it didn't work for you, but it wasn't just as simple as they made it all up. They knew what they were doing, particularly if you go back to season 3. That's some of the big stuff with Danny and John. Is that their ship name? Johnny Targaryen now. I really think some of the groundwork is being laid there and being laid there well. Andrew, I want to get to this comment here. It says, hey, Ken, big Force Center and Schmodown fan. Been loving the GOT episode lookbacks. What are some non-book characters you thought were good additions to the show? Thought Locke in season 3 was good. That's a great choice there. Locke, with Noah Taylor, right, as Locke, who's the roadie from Almost Famous. He's the Stillwater roadie. And I absolutely love him because of that. He was also in the Tomb Raider movies, right? He's so good. Locke, yeah, that's a great one there. There's so many choices, and I want to hear some of your choices here in chat too. If you're watching along live here on YouTube, of non-book characters that work well in the show. I do go to Talisa. I go to Talisa a lot because I think it really was necessary to spend time with the person that Robb Stark fell in love with to throw it all away. And as we know, George doesn't really do that. It's Jane Westerling, right? It's thing. Rob, as we know, famously not a POV character in the book, which is fine. That's fine. But he's an actor. You got Richard Madden. He starts bringing this character to life, and I love that Benioff and Weiss have said, and they said in some of the special feature stuff in season 3 of we after season 1 we started writing more for him. Which is the show has that freedom to do that. To go, hey, let's start exploring this more. And Richard Madden brings Rob Stark to life even more than we can imagine. And I think you had to have someone like that to make it have more impact, to make it work a little bit better in the sense of, she's that brutal stabbing, which some, I guess you could argue, do you 100% need that in terms of just violence on TV? Maybe not. But it just broke all of our hearts. And it's definitely pulling on our heartstrings a little bit. I mean, she's talking about naming the kid Ned, little Ned Eddard, the third or whatever, second. I don't know I forget how many Eddards in the Stark family. And so it's pulling on our strings a little bit there, but it just made it all more worth it for me. So I think Talisa for me still might be one of my favorites in terms of show only characters there. So curious in chat, toss some at me there. And pretty soon we're going to open up the StreamYard line. The link is in the Discord in the Casterly Talk section of my Ken Knapsack Discord page. And if you're a Patreon supporter, you get access to that. Please fire up your camera, get on in. And if you don't want to get on camera and just want to have your voice on the show, don't worry. Do that as well. I'll bring in a faceless shot. One thing I did want to talk about, though, is a little bit of House of the Dragon. All right, it's your House of the Dragon news roundup and a look forward to. And I want to hear your thoughts, and we'll come back to any thoughts you guys all have about show-only characters that you enjoy. I love going to 2 news sources for Game of Thrones, and I highly recommend that you check them out. I highly recommend that you spend some time on these 2 websites. I love going to Watchers on the Wall. I love going to winteriscoming.net. A lot of fun stuff. So go with, if you want to go into House of the Dragon completely blind, maybe you haven't read Fire and Blood, maybe you don't know too much about it, then go to those websites with caution. Sorry, I was distracted by a comment here. I'm gonna bring this comment up. Show only is all. Yeah. Sorry, that caught my eye. Ranger Donald will come back to that. Yeah. So let's go first to Watchers on the Wall. Luca Nieto posted a story of House of the Dragon shooting in Spain. Caceres. Is that how you say it? Probably not the way I mess up names a lot. And there's a lot of cool shots. Again, we're especially this week in over in the movie news world, which I'm thankfully not a part of anymore. A lot of talk about what shots you should be discussing and sharing. And I generally, especially when it comes to Star Wars, I pull back on all of it. So I'm not going to discuss some of the pictures in detail. You can look at them if you want to go to the Watchers on the Wall. We got maybe a revelation of who will be playing the Kingsguard twin brothers, Arik and Eric Cargill. We got a possible speculation on that. We got some great shots of the look of the Gold Cloaks, City Watch back in the day there. That looks pretty cool as well. And it's amazing just to see the show come to life. I love seeing that kind of stuff. Again, I'm trying to dance around, not seeing anything I don't want to see. Watchers of the Wall, I think, is generally a pretty responsible site there, so I would trust them not to share a big moment of 2 characters meeting or a death or something like that. It's right now just fun speculation, and I just love seeing it. I just love knowing that stuff is being shot, and it looks great. And we'll talk about the look of the show in a second. So shout out to Watchers of the Wall for posting those things there. Going back to some questions, Balerion the Conqueror says, Ken, you recommended History of Westeros in 2019. They just started their Valor Rereadus, where every week they read 7 chapters and review them. It's a great series to follow along like a book club. Yeah, I have not taken a dive into their book reads too much, but I love the channel, love the podcast. Especially during the show, during the run of the show, there were podcasts that I love going into because they're so book heavy. And there's always a danger being book heavy when you're trying to review the show. If you're too tied to what's there, too tied to the theories, too tied to the plots and the characters that are at play in the books, I think you can overlook what's going on in the show. But History of Westeros is such a knowledgeable Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm sure House of the Dragon resource. I always recommend it. Like I said, Casterly Talk is part of this larger ecosystem. I want to talk about the Winter is Coming.net stories. Dan Selke's got 2 stories he posted that are really interesting to me. The first one, picking up the reason I really want to bring up the Watchers on the Wall story, just kind of looking and seeing the pictures and seeing the gold cloaks as they will be 200 so years ago. It looks like the show. It looks like Game of Thrones. And that is important to me, and it's important to a lot of people, though I need the show to feel like its own, right? And I think there's this weird place if you're trying to market the show, if you're HBO, and if you're trying to design and create and shoot the show. Game of Thrones was uber popular, immensely popular. But you also know it ended with a little bit of shadows around it. I'm not going to deny that as someone who loves season 8. You can't deny that there was some conversations around the final couple seasons. So it's like a political candidate. It's like if you're running from a particular party and you're trying to get your vote, but the person that came before you from the same party, even if they were, say, the president or something, or the senator, the mayor of the city, even though, you're trying to get the people that voted for them, but you're also trying to split the hairs there, thread that needle, and separate yourself from some of the stuff that they might have brought upon themselves. There's some of the stuff they might have said, but you're still trying to come over with me, while also trying to bring in new people or trying to bring back people who were maybe turned off by this mayor for right or wrong reasons. I see House of the Dragon kind of having to be in that spot where it's definitely its own thing. It needs to be its own thing, but you can see by some designs it's playing in that TV world and it has to kind of sit there. So Dan Selke ran a story on winteriscoming.net that I liked, and that was showrunners Ryan Condal and Miguel Sapochnik were sitting down for an interview with Newsweek, so you can link to the actual Newsweek story if you want, but Dan pulled out this quote that I thought was interesting. I want to get your guys' take on it if you're watching live. I've been involved in the franchise for a while. This is Miguel Sapochnik speaking, and I think it's really important that the franchise evolve. It's not the same story. It's not the same characters, and therefore it needs visually evolution. But at the same time, people want to see Game of Thrones, and we shouldn't shortchange them of that. I love that answer. I absolutely love that answer. It's a little political speak. It's just vague enough to make all the sense you want it. It is saying that the show itself, which includes right now, we've seen some casting that's already, I think, making for a more diverse cast, which is I think something that's necessary and something that's wanted. So just in that regard, it's going to be look and feel different. I said recently on the rewatch, talking about, actually it was the last episode out. Yeah, we were talking about the Mises stuff, which has a little bit of the bad taste of the white savior trope and how it did look different in the books. It was designed to be different in the books. The people of Yunkai were of all races and colors and creeds. All of them had been enslaved, and the show didn't do that. George has given answers. He was maybe a little bit more involved in the show back then. It was local casting, everything. At the end of the day, it looks how it looks. And at the end of the day, that doesn't necessarily stand up to the test of time. I think it's still a great story point. And I think it's still a beautiful moment. It's very important for Danny. I think you can try to separate those two talking points. But I said this, and this is just my theory. I'm not saying it's right. It's just Game of Thrones was developed. Hell, the book was written in a different time. And thankfully, we've hopefully all growing as a society, and our demands as viewers are a little bit different. What we expect and what we want to see, what we want you to try to get to is a little bit different. We always change the way in which you watch things. And that's a good thing, because if the demands of television viewers didn't change in 2011, I don't think Game of Thrones would have worked. Following a show like Sopranos or Lost are some of those big shows that turned TV into something else. I grew up in an era where TV was the lesser. It was the lesser form of entertainment. Yes, you had the great sitcoms. Yes, you had the great dramas, maybe Dallas or Dynasty, or Falcon's Crest. Maybe you were all watching that. It was appointment television. I grew up watching MASH, which was a very important show. A lot of the Norman Lear stuff in the 70s, very important stuff. But our demands and what we wanted out of TV changed, and it made it bigger and bolder. And I think we're in a period of time too. And I think Game of Thrones came up in a different time where the expectations were a little different, and the show was slow to adapt to it. And I don't necessarily think Miguel Sapochnik's just talking about that, but I think the show will feel a little bit different in that regard. We've already heard things, some of the scripts, some of the people say, and I think Ramin Djawadi was talking about this, the scripts were great, and other people were there talking about some of these stories are some of the best that they've seen in Game of Thrones. So I think that's important. I think that's going to be part of it. But then it all boils down to, again, what voters are you taking with you? The people who voted for the last show, are they coming on? And how do you get people who didn't vote for the last show at the end? How do you get them forward? And I think a lot of it has to do with the look and the feel and the vibe. And I cannot think of someone more qualified than Miguel Sapochnik. We talked about that season 3 to season 4 transition in Game of Thrones. It has to do with story. It has to do with, I think, scope, has to do with budget. But I think even the look still looks the same. It still feels the same, but I think the look got bigger. And I think someone like Miguel Sapochnik, and the way he put big battles together and big episodes together, made them so cinematic in a show that was already cinematic. I'm looking for him to take that stuff forward, that big feel, that big scope, while also telling their own stories with someone like Ryan Condal. So great story, great little quote there. Check it out there if you want more. Newsweek, but winteriscoming.net there. And then the other thing, the final thing, the fun thing we want to talk about, it is still one of my favorite shots of the House of Dragon teaser trailer. And that is the throne itself. Let's bring up that throne. I still have that picture. Boom. It's also our logo, but here's the picture. This throne with so many swords, and a little bit more. We still don't have the many stairs that we know the throne has in the books, which I actually like. I think that works for the book. I've always thought this was kind of the better decision for the show. Budget reasons or not, it just makes a little bit more sense. But now we got the new updated throne, and I love that. And Dan Selke also put a story up on winteriscoming.net talking about just that. And he was speaking with veteran TV director Greg Yatenes. I got to get used to some of these new names I'm seeing here. He's a veteran TV director, though. Greg Yatenes is one of the people stepping behind the camera at the first season of House of the Dragon, Dan Selke writes. And Greg says this: I was so glad that they showed the throne room, because that was the thing I was most geeking out about when I saw the concept art for that. I love that too. We have the great exchange, and Dan quotes it there, of Varys and Littlefinger having that great conversation about the throne, and Peter Baelish talking about the throne. It's barely 200 swords, but swords, but it's the legend that we tell ourselves, and we believe the legend. Print the legend is, I think, what basically what Baelish was saying. So, but I love what that throne means. The Targaryens at their full strength, their full power. I think that's great. I think it's a good look, and I think that's a great way to just piggyback off of what Miguel Sapochnik was saying about, it's the same show, it's the same world, but it's its own thing, and it's a different time. And that's just the one thing that I just think captures that right now. And it's just great to hear someone behind the show, this Greg Yatenes guy, saying that. I'm so glad. I was geeking out. So glad you all got to see that, is basically what he's saying. That's something I love there as well. So, all right. Nathan comes back with a Streamlab with a history of readers' concerns with the show. Would you recommend reading Fire and Blood before the show airs or after it is done? Great question. Great question, Nathan, to take us out of the House of the Dragon news discussion. I think it's less of an investment to read the Fire and Blood section. Now, I recommend reading the entire Fire and Blood book, and I think you have enough time to do it before the show. Because it reads like a history book. It is written as, living history for the show. I think, and for me, that made a very enjoyable experience because in terms of reading George R. R. Martin stuff, I think George can get a little bloated in the best of ways. I make the joke about the eel pie thing. It's like that's a good example of you're going to describe every meal in detail, and he's going to do it because he can. In Fire and Blood, he didn't have that kind of time and didn't have that kind of room, and it's more of a straight, streamlined reading experience for me. But it also kind of does at times read like a history book. This happened, this happened, this happened. And there's stories around it. There's this great, wonderful character, Mushroom, that I hope finds his way into House of the Dragon. But I think the difference, Nathan, with that is I think you'll get a little bit better picture of the lay of the land because it is just the history of the in-world history of the show in the books. And because they're pulling out a lot of the history, as we know, but the bulk of the show will be around this Dance of Dragons, this Targaryen civil war, the blacks and the greens and all that kind of stuff. And the reason I say all that kind of stuff, it's because unless you're studying it every day, like say I do with Star Wars stuff, I sometimes get a little confused myself of all the players. When Rachel Cushing can come back on the show, when I work out my own schedule to have some people on this show a little more regularly, Rachel Cushing is someone who could just boom, toss out the history of Targaryens and all of Song of Ice and Fire, like it's real, but like it's lived in for her. I don't think it's going to destroy any plot or any surprises because I don't know where they're going to necessarily take the show. It could go different, but I think it still kind of has to end up. And the book is going to, yes, Lauren, we're going to take some calls. If you're ready, get into that StreamYard. What am I trying? I think Ranger Donald's explained it better than even I could. Challenge in terms of names to remember and the timeline they go into the series, but it's definitely worth reading if you want to know more going into it. Yes, that's kind of it, Nathan. I think it's just like if you're going to watch a World War II movie and you're a little bit more familiar with the history of World War II and what led us to there, maybe even coming out of World War I, and you just kind of know, you might get a little bit more out of it. You just might not feel as lost in the beginning. And I'm not 30 seconds into Game of Thrones, I was lost. 2 minutes, 10 minutes into Game of Thrones, I was not lost because they were telling me the characters' names and I was seeing the characters' names. I'm not one. I love making the joke. Look, a lot of names are similar, especially if you're reading the books, but the show did a pretty good job of saying that's them, this is us, and this is what we're doing. I think this show will do that as well. So I'm not saying you'll be lost, but I just think you have a bigger picture of the history going into it. Is what I think. And Eric points out, I love how in season 5, Shireen was reading the Dance of Dragons and all about what happened. Yeah, that's true too. That's true too. Absolutely. Shireen spoiling books, spoiling House of the Dragon before we even knew she was spoiling it there as well. Yeah. So anyways, I recommend you do read it. I only hesitate, Nathan, because again, I don't quite know. It's hard to say. How many seasons is the show plan? Is it going to be a one and it's done if it doesn't work, or they got something locked in? I don't know all those details. Maybe they're out there on winterscoming.net or Watchers on the Wall. You could read Fire and Blood, and then you're going to read past Dance of Dragons. It's there's 300 years of Targaryen history. This is about the first 150. So we're waiting for that volume 2 to take us up to more of the present day stuff we know. But it's a section. It's a big section, but it's a section of the book. So you'll learn what happens. That's the only hesitation. If you don't want to know who wins the war between the greens and the blacks and who takes control and some of the big events, yeah, then maybe you want to avoid it. But if you want to get a lay of the land, maybe we compromise, Nathan. Maybe you read in, you read Fire and Blood up until the Dance of Dragons, and then you stop. And then you get the history, which I think the show is going to cover in some kind of flashback capacity, or maybe just episodes set in a different time. And then you get the lay of the land, and then you won't be spoiled. I think you can do that. I think you can do that. All right, so we get ready. If you got any calls, we got about 10 minutes left here in the show. So if you want to StreamYard in and you are a Patreon supporter of mine at patreon.com/catnapsock, from there you can access the Discord server. And from there, you can go to the Casterly Talk section and you can find a link for the StreamYard. So I think Lauren Romo said she was going to try to get in here. Lauren, whenever you're ready, get on in there. And anyone else, we'll take some calls, some live calls, like the old radio days of mine here. Just I'm looking on the monitor here, and I've really got Davos after the Battle of Blackwater Bay. Beard. Not necessarily. If you're listening to the podcast, this is the sound of a Davos beard, but a sun-drenched. Ranger Donald would love to, but my voice is still pretty shot. Ranger Donald, you go ahead and rest up. We'll be here. We'll be doing this again and again. Ranger Donald also has a good point as well. The World of Ice and Fire app is fantastic, and I can't help but recommend that for everything in this world. Yes, that's a great idea. Where did I have an entire GOT section? Is this the right app or is this the game? It might be the game. Yes, the game. Have you guys ever played this game? If you're watching, this is the one where you go beyond the wall. I haven't played it in a while. Yeah, I need to update. That's not the one I want. And then GOT Conquest. I have not played GOT Conquest in a long time. I don't even know if my castle's still going on there. That's not the app I wanted. Where is the app? World of Ice and Fire. There we go. If you guys are watching along on YouTube, the World of Ice and Fire app is still one of those things I just love. It is book-based, but some of the design, some of the art that they show is definitely show-based. And I just love, I'll just do a random, I'll just go through, look at, Aegon Blackfire. Dad is Daemon Blackfire the First. Siblings are Aemon Blackfire, Daemon Blackfire. Look at that. Place of Death. Oh, it's got all of it. So be careful of spoilers. There you go. You want to learn about Aegon Blackfire? You got it. I just love. So Nathan, if you haven't ever checked that out, and perhaps you have, I love my Game of Thrones maps. I'll study the Beyond the Wall map and daydream about getting lost up there in the dangerous passes there, the Skirling Pass. How far do I want to go into the lands of always winter? I'll play around with that map, and that can help too. And maybe if they do some kind of maybe we'll do a bit of an update or something for House of the Dragon. I haven't heard about that there. Lauren says she's on my way, firing up the computer. You got to turn on that old whirly box, Lauren. Fire up that. What do you got? A gateway? What do you got? A gateway or a ColecoVision? You got to fire up that computer and get in there as well. Here we go. I think we have our first live caller here on Casterly Talk. A lot of you know her from the Geek Broadcast and the Galactic Podcast. She's great over there in the Star Wars world. But let's bring in Lauren Romo. Lauren, how you doing?
7 blessings, Ken. What's going on, buddy?
7 blessings to you, my friend. How are you?
We haven't talked Game of Thrones, which is really funny because we're both huge fans.
Yeah.
We talk a lot of Star Wars together. So I am excited to talk to some Game of Thrones because I love this world that George R.R. Martin built, the show. You're more, I think if I'm correct, Ken, you read the books, you're more of the book reader. I'm not. So I love your deep dives in Casterly Talk because you guys reference a lot of book stuff and talk about that stuff. So I love listening to you talk about Game of Thrones as much as I love listening to you talk Star Wars. So super excited to be here, my friend.
When I love listening to you talk Star Wars as well. So right back at you. So let me start. I want to hear what's on your mind. I want to give you the floor here, Lauren. But this is so you not being a book reader, but a giant show fan. Are you ever going to take that dive, or is it like, I'll wait till George finishes, or it just doesn't factor into my fandom? What's your stance on that?
Well, George ever finish the book is really
That's a fair question.
That's $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
I think I will. Eventually I will. I think right now I kind of enjoy the show because
Hmm.
as I and you might be able to expand on this more than I could, but the books are they're dense with
Yeah.
characters and a lot of things. So I like what the show has done to kind of compact it and make it like you were talking about a little bit earlier, maybe easier to follow and easier to take with and like oh
Yeah.
these people or those people and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Look, no,
I
I'll say that this might be a hot take in the Song of Ice and Fire
hot
world,
take.
but I will always say, and I'd be curious to see Donald Long and Eric Monroe, a lot of my other book reader fans in here, and anyone
Mhm.
else who's a book reader. I still think season 2 is a better story than book 2, Clash of Kings, which is what
Ooh,
it's
okay.
loosely connected and based on, right?
Mhm.
And I love Clash of Kings. Storm of Swords is my favorite as well. I'm right there with you too, Eric. Though I do love a Dance of Dragons. Um, yeah, and that is only because George doesn't there's no like a bowling alley. He doesn't have the safety bumpers on. When he
Right.
writes a story, he can do whatever he wants.
Right.
And there's some great stuff in book 2, but season 2 just was like, we can't spend time doing that. We got to do this. And I thought it was a little more
Condensed.
streamlined. But
Yeah.
that's just my hot take, Lauren.
That's a good hot take, Belle. It's a really good hot take. Yeah, I think Gate when we talk about Game of Thrones, I think it's such a political thriller
Hmm.
that is in sci-fi, and that's what I think I really gravitated to more as I
Yeah.
like rewatch this show. Because I mean, I probably just like you, I've rewatched it so much because it's so good. Because I really, when you rewatch it, you see things that you're like, oh God, how did I not see that coming in season like 4 or 5? Like the
Yeah.
connections they make through this entire world is amazing stuff. It's really good stuff. But
Love it.
I got a question for you though, Ken, and
Hit me.
for House of Dragons. So I'm
Yeah.
super excited. I Targaryens really intrigue me. It's a very interesting family, kind of like their whole
You,
creed and everything.
you could say they're an interesting family. Yeah,
Just a little bit.
a little bit. We got some things going on.
We got some things going on. So, and I'm excited to really dive deep into that family, right? And like you said, the book that is kind of based the show off of,
Right.
I got to read too. And I know it's like you're saying, it's more reads like a history book
Yeah.
than maybe like a novel per se. But I'm hoping that they kind of touch on the outside too of like different families. So like, will
Yeah.
we see the Starks? Do they mention the Stark family? Do they mention the Lannisters? Like, I don't know. Maybe like where the Lannister dynasty is. Is it even started? Where are they at with it? Like, for me, that stuff kind of intrigues me too. To
Yeah.
as just a show fan, to tie into families and things that I'm aware of, 200 years, after this. So, what do
Yeah.
you think they'll do that? Do you think there's
Yeah,
mentions?
I think you're gonna have to,
Mm-hmm.
and again, the specific memories don't always jump to me, other than some of the early Baratheon stuff, which do tie
Right.
to some of the early Targaryen stuff. But yeah, I think especially the Lannisters are going to be there. The Starks, we got Torrhen Stark, the king who knelt, but that's probably a little bit before the time of this story. So
Right.
they're going to be present, and I think that's going to be. I'm curious to see, going back to what Miguel Sapochnik was saying about this balance.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think you're going to have to play that game a little bit. And
Yeah.
I still think one of the reasons that Blood Moon pilot maybe didn't get picked up, it was too far back and the landscape looked a little bit different and you got
Mm-hmm.
to hit those kind of marketing points. So I think
Right.
they're going to be factored in. I think you're going to meet a lot of other wonderful families,
Yeah.
a lot of other things that aren't present in the show or just only mention the show or mention Song of Ice and Fire. You're going to get really to spend a lot more time with those families and
Mm-hmm.
the Targaryen light families. Even though the Targaryens is always interesting. No, in the history of it, in the history over in the old lands in the old world,
Mm-hmm.
Targaryens were a little bit down on the social chain.
Right.
They weren't the top of dogs. They were like, hey, we're out of here. We're gonna go to this other land. We'll see you in 100 years or so. And then boom, Valeria explodes, and the doom of Valeria happens, and they're like, well, look at us, we're winning. Um, yeah, so some good questions. Ranger Donald says the Starks will be in the show somehow. Ranger Donald also
Ooh.
says
Okay.
Lannisters don't exist. Yeah, yeah. The history of the Lannisters and Land the Clever and all that kind of stuff is
Mm-hmm.
aren't immediately popping into my brain right now, which is why I'm saying Casterly Talk is just a small ecosystem of the Game of Thrones discussion world. You can get that information out there as well. Hightowers, yes. Otto Hightower is going to be
Ooh.
prominent in the show. You're going to meet the Hightowers, the Valerians. You're going to meet a lot of those. Yeah, Casterly's possibly there. Yeah,
Mhm.
a
I
lot of that. Yeah,
I would love to see too. I mean, if they even go north of the wall, like,
yeah,
do they even touch those type of stories?
yeah,
Because again, maybe this is explained in books and whatnot. So this is why I lend
yeah.
my knowledge and gaining from you. But do we even know like how far the Night King was building his army up? Because obviously it didn't take a day. Like this must have been like a process. How long? I mean, was 200 years too early, or is it like, does he?
I
I think
It's
that'd be
a
cool.
great question. I want to highlight this comment from Lizzie Bennett. Hi,
Hmm.
Lizzie. The Lannisters are cast. That's true, but I can't wait to see who plays Krieg and Stark.
Ooh,
Yeah, so there.
okay.
So see, Lauren, you're going to be getting some of these names, and thank you everyone in chat for jumping in there with that information. In
Hmm.
terms of that stuff, so we talked earlier about show only characters that you might like over, something that's not in the book or a different version of the book. The
Hmm.
Night King, versus the Night's King is something. It's different. It's essentially show only, inspired greatly by what's at play in the books, to be clear.
Hmm.
Don't want anyone to misquote me or misunderstand me on that, but it's kind of its own thing in a way.
Hmm.
So the show can play around with that lore and can play around that history. But for me, for my money, I think
Hmm.
it's a time period where like what's OSHA say? They were sleeping, but they ain't sleeping no more. Like they're
Right.
sleeping. So whatever happened might have already happened. The long night, some of the stuff that might have been in maybe Blood Moon, maybe some of the other stuff. But what you're asking is something that I think needs to be thought about. Again, going back to Sapochnik's quote, you just saw this big battle. You just saw the White Walkers return in 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, but
Hmm.
are you going to feel their absence? I personally don't think you will. I think you'd be so busy with this stuff
Hmm.
that and the Night's Watch is clearly a part of this show, been around for generations up there. We know,
Right. Right.
so they might factor in some way, but I just don't think it's going to be in the same way. And maybe people aren't calling out for that. I don't know. In talking
That's
about in
true.
general fans, I don't
Yeah.
know, but
Yeah.
it's gonna be fun because you know me, I have my Night's Watch hat. I love the Night's Watch. I
Yeah.
love the story North of the Wall. So we'll see. But one thing I'll say, your hands will be so full with Targaryens
Yeah.
yelling at Targaryens that I think you're not going to miss it.
Because from what my very limited knowledge of the House of Blood book,
Mhm.
it is like a huge family soap opera with the Targaryens. So that alone, like you're saying, will probably be an amazing storytelling in itself. And even
Yeah,
if we stay in that kind of realm of Targaryens and just the families and don't go north of the wall, like you said, we're gonna be so intrigued with it that we probably won't notice it. But
yeah,
I'd just be curious because as a fan of the show, like, do they try to tell people that are kind of like me, like, hey, remember these people, remember these
mhm,
names, these events? Like, I think that's probably, I know what you think,
yeah,
like maybe that's how they get them back into watching,
yeah.
Game of Thrones and like the Westeros story, because there's so much to do in Westeros. Like, it's such a
It's
it's a great story.
It's like a good theme park. There's just a lot to do. You wanna go down the water slides in Dorne, you can go there, you can go up to, the Matterhorn up there north of the wall. Yeah,
Right.
there's a lot, and that's what's intriguing to me, and the focus is clearly on, the Targaryens, House
Right.
of the Dragon being the name of the show. Targaryen Civil War is what we, know and do believe we're going into, but yeah, there's so
Hmm.
many other things at play, and there's so many other characters that will spring out, that, yeah, I think I'm excited to see what the show will do, and,
Hmm.
I don't necessarily think it'll be centralized. I mean, like for me, like I'd love to see a lot of Essos. I love to,
Oh yeah,
meet
that'd be
meet some
great.
Dothraki we haven't even met yet that aren't even in the books or like I would love to play around with that too and
Hmm.
see. But this is also and I think if you're watching this show now and you're listening, I'm talking this one, Casterly Talk. I think you're of the Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire ilk, where we'll take any of these stories and we'll take
Hmm.
15 shows. Like if there's just a show called Burr, it's cold, it's the story of the Night King. Like I'll take
Oh
that.
yeah.
If you want to just go to a Bravo series, I'll take that. I know I know they're working a lot of those animated shows, and I
Hmm.
even know a little insight into some of what's going on with the animated shows, and it's all pretty interesting, and it's all
Mm.
pretty potentially special, potentially fun for fans of this world who want to spend more time in all corners of this universe, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Dorne would be another place too, I think. Obviously, it seems like we'll be definitely going there in the show to explore more and
Mhm.
to really kind of learn that kind of the politics within that, how these families and how that all kind of
Yeah.
transpired to what we know, obviously 200 years later. So, yeah, I'm so excited to get back into Westeros. Like just
Yeah.
the politics
Same.
of it, like I was saying, the storylines that we are going to potentially see in the characters and these moments and these
Yeah.
dragons. Like we are going to see so many dragons. Like
You're going to see a lot of dragons.
it's gonna be cool. Like I mean, that was one of the best parts as a fan of the show was
Yeah.
when the progression of these dragons
Yeah.
growing and becoming bigger, and then just the CGI of it was
Mm.
amazing. So just to see kind of that more focus is going to be
Yeah.
really cool for me for sure. Yeah.
Love that. I love that you're excited for it. I love that you're
Yeah.
excited for it as someone who loves the show and maybe hasn't taken that deep dive into the books yet. I think
Hmm.
that's it's a great spot to be. But I do recommend reading Fire and Blood again with what with the compromise we reached with Nathan. I think it's a good way to go. Maybe read up until the Dance of the Dragons, and then don't go beyond it, and then you won't be spoiled for the show. But you'll have a little bit better lay of the land. I don't know.
That's
I don't
fair.
know. Eric,
That's fair.
Ranger Donna, Lizzie, what do you guys think there? Should you read Fire and Blood up until about that point before you watch the show? We'll see.
Yeah, it's gonna be
So,
interesting to see again what I mean. The like you're saying, like we talked about earlier, George R. R. Martin, the books. Will he
yeah.
finish it? What's gonna happen with that? So and then just even Game of Thrones as a whole. Like
Mm,
I would love, obviously, I like that they're going back to kind of talk about the Targaryens and that family, the dynasty that we were so accustomed to hearing about in Game of Thrones a
yeah.
lot. To see that like transpire is gonna be cool. But then I really and I know there's a lot of talks of different shows, like you're saying, the animated series and stuff. I would love a after post Game of Thrones, and maybe we'll never get this, maybe not, but like a post Game of Thrones. What's Arya doing? Did she ever find what's
Yeah.
west or Westeros? Like that would be
It
fun stuff to explore.
to me, and it's certainly something that comes up every now and then, and we believe it's, certainly don't believe it's in the works or anything. But I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what I love about what's going on right here, right now, is this expansion of this franchise because
Mm.
HBO needs to win the streaming wars, wants to win the streaming wars.
Yep.
That's why we're in this position, without a
Mm-hmm.
doubt. We're looking over at Star Wars, which is now 10 years into the Disney era, 6 years or so removed from Force Awakens. We're in a spot where 2022 in terms of Star Wars TV might be bigger than we could have ever expected,
Yeah.
and things that weren't maybe thought of but weren't fully planned when this sale happened, or even when the era launched with actually first Star Wars Rebels in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
um 5 years from now, they approach Maisie Williams and say, you want to do a limited series of Arya's journey west?
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely.
great.
Might not want to do it now. They might not want to do it
Mm-hmm.
now. George might not want that to happen now. Who knows? But I think 5 years from now, if this works, if House of the Dragon is going, if the animated shows start to explode and people are liking them, and I don't think it needs to be to the level of Game of Thrones with the millions and millions and millions of people watching. I just think it needs to work enough there's a love for this. Then we could
Yeah.
spend that time going with that stuff. So I'm holding out hope for that. If you are too.
Yeah, no, I totally am, man. I mean, it'd be fun to again. This is definitely more of a show fan perspective for me. Is because those characters were so cool in Game of Thrones, the Arya, the Jon Snows, Sansa, like all
Yeah.
that. Like I want like definitely for me, I want more of their stories because I would love to see what's the next step, what happens,
Yeah.
what happens to Bran as he's ruling Westeros and
Yeah.
what's happening in Essos, like you're saying, like what have we missed, what are we going to learn, what could we learn really in the future and all
Yeah.
that. But like I totally agree, I think it really comes down to George finishing the book and then maybe saying
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead,
Yeah. Look,
do this.
I also think I would watch a 2 hour HBO Max movie of just Jon Snow sitting in the snow north of the wall, relaxing.
Yep, me too.
not worried about anything. He and Tormund hanging out. Maybe John meets a nice person he falls in love with. He maybe goes back to a different cave. I don't know. Just nothing, no drama, no nothing. Just 2 hours of Jon Snow going, oh, this is nice. This is kind of nice.
I would love it.
Lizzie chimes in with another great comment. Lizzie, good to have you here today. Maybe a good thing to read The Rogue Prince to know a bit about Daemon Targaryen. I
Ooh, okay.
recommend that as well. And I think I actually have to take a deeper dive into Rogue Prince. I'm staring off screen at my bookshelf to make sure I have that. I have the book Winning Westeros, which is a realistic look at how you could win Westeros with the military. Beyond the Wall, I have a lot of different stories, books over there. I think I got to make sure. And then I have a lot of the Duncan Egg stuff too, which won't necessarily factor into this story. But yeah, Rogue Prince is a great call, Lizzie. That's great stuff.
So
Get
good.
ready for House of the Dragon, which is what we're going to be doing here. Any final thoughts here, Lauren?
No, just super excited for the show. Really excited to get back into Westeros because it was such a cool. It's such a cool world. Like we've been talking about. Like it's political. It has that sci-fi to it. Like it's just a really well-rounded world where it has everything for everybody, right? If you like the little political thrillers, if you like
Yeah.
the sci-fi aspect, if you like the dragons and all that, it has everything for you, and it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, Lauren. I appreciate that, and tell them since you're kind of a de facto guest here today, not just calling in. Tell them where you can be found because you got a lot of great podcasts out there. I want them all to hear.
Yeah, so Star Wars, I have a Star Wars podcast called The Galactic Pod or The Galactic Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at The Galactic Pod. And then I have a kind of general geeky podcast called The Geek Broads Cast. And we are at Geek Broads Pod on Twitter. I really should have worked on that because it really comes off the tongue a little twisty. So. But you can follow me on all those. We're on Apple Pod, Google Play, all the good stuff. And then you can find me if you want to, Loro Knows on Twitter.
Love it. Absolutely. Good to have you here. Lauren
Thank you,
Roman, we'll
buddy.
have you back again. Thanks for checking in and thanks for being excited about more Game of Thrones content.
Yeah, absolutely, pal. Absolutely.
All right. There we go. Lauren Romo there. And Eric Monroe says that John and Ghost Adventures who wouldn't be down for that? Just Ghost with one ear. A little damaged scar eye, just hanging out with John Tormund, just telling stories about screwing bears, and John just nodding along. I think I'd be there for that. All right. On that note, I think we're going to start the wrap up here today. Thank you all for listening to Casterly Talk. We'll be back next week and in the coming weeks with the look at season 4 as we do the deep dives on the rewatch there. But we'll be doing this more from time to time. Casterly Talk, the podcast, is still out there and available for all of you. But also don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and hit that bell. It's not shame, as we learned. It's just hitting the bell. We're part of currently the Blue Wire Podcast Feed Network, brought to you by the Good People Association. But as you have all heard, we made that announcement recently. Content and programming will change and essentially cease as it is now for GPA. But the podcast feed, we're trying to work out the details on that. But Casterly Talk will remain somehow, some way. It will be a podcast, and you'll be able to find it as you always have been able to find it wherever podcasts are found. Victor chiming in there. Thanks, stream. Victor, thank you for your Streamlab donation today. That means a lot. Trey T, awesome episode. No, you're awesome, Trey. And Trey, I got your recommendation coming up on Mixcloud, my show over there, Pop Rocket Radio. Check that out this Friday night. I'll have your thing on there. Eric Moreau, thank you for the support as always. And Lizzie, thanks for your comments. You guys are so helpful. Love having a nice positive atmosphere to discuss this wonderful world we all love and get ready for House of the Dragon. Look back on Game of Thrones and just get ready for whatever is coming our way. There you go. I love this. Next Christmas with Tormund, Ghost, and John. Lizzie has the comment of the day there. That is amazing. And Amelia Clark can sing in that one as well. All right. That's it, friends. That is it. We'll see you next time here on Casterly Talk.